Hey guys, Voltex here, coming at you with another Fantasy LCS vlog. A little bit of a background change. I'm over at my uncle's house instead of my house. If you hear any jingles, it's just the dog. Sorry, can't do anything about that. Um, and yeah, so I got a little bit more fancy. Have the overlay. Also have some graphics because I'm gonna do the power rankings for you guys after long promised. And yeah, if there's any camera movement, I apologize. I'm also doing this on a bed because there's not a desk in this house that I can use. So sorry. But yeah, so let's get started with EU review. Uh, Day one, Gambit over Copenhagen Wolves. So not too surprising here. Copenhagen Wolves just totally lost. No reason to think they're going to get a win the rest of the split, which also means that anyone who's playing against Copenhagen Wolves can expect to have a nice fantasy day. So I guess not all is bad. Rocket over SK in a long, drawn-out fantasy mecca. So so yeah, it's just going to show that SK is definitely getting themselves back into fantasy relevance. They have these long games that just are drawn out, and even when they lose, they went 0-2 this week. They still put up a lot of points, so definitely good. As for Rocket, also it's also good because they're actually been really consistent. They had that one off week when they first got Raleigh's when they went 0-2, and outside of that, they've been really consistent. They've been really good for a mid/low tier team. So definitely cool stuff coming out of EU. Fnatic over Giants, not too big of a surprise there, but Unicorns of Love over Origin, there was a surprise, especially Unicorns coming off a really bad week. Just came and they beat Origin. I think this had to do a lot with I think Origin, just a randomly dropped game. They didn't have that great of a draft, so. But honestly, this is really telling because it's really what is the difference between Fnatic and Origin. Yeah, Fnatic who's perfect, and then and then H2K and Origin who, they're good. They lose games to Fnatic, but they're also, have these random losses to other teams like Rocket, and now Unicorns of Love. So it just shows that Fnatic really is just the perfect fantasy choices. And then H2K over Elements, so not too surprising there. Giants over SK again, in a long drawn out fantasy filled point game. SK, honestly, I hope SK doesn't tilt after this game because it was a rough game for them to lose. But it happens. But they're putting up fantasy points, and that's all that matters for us, right? Gambit over Rocket. This was good. Gambit had this chance to go 2-0, start climbing back into the ranks. And yeah, this wasn't that great of a game for Rocket. They were pretty. There was never a chance for them to win this game. But I think it's good. Gambit coming back, showing that in certain situations and matchups they can be utilized. Fnatic, Origin, and H2K, last three games of this week, all beating their respective low or mid-tier opponents. So nothing particularly exciting there. Switching over to NA for week 6, Impulse over Enemy. Impulse started out a little behind this game, but they were able to come back and and win the game through some good team fights. Put up a bunch of points. I know there's talk about Adrian getting replaced. I don't know. Just if you have Adrian, just make sure that you're aware and are ready to pick up whoever the new support player is gonna be, because you don't want to get left in the dust. TSM over TDK, not too surprising. The result wasn't too surprising, but I was surprised that Turtle played. Turtle didn't play this game because I thought he did really well this week. Really well last week, and I didn't really see too much of a reason to not start him this week, but they didn't. And the worst part about it is that Fantasy didn't make any sort of adjustment to this situation. So for Wild Turtle owners, you were basically screwed over this week because you only got one game out of them, and it happened to be the game they lost. So you got like 7 points from your number 1 or number 2 draft pick. So hopefully they can make some changes in the future, whether you can change out players between games, or whether it's just like a TSM 80 carry like Alpha Draft does with Easy Hoon and Faker. You pick one and you get points for whichever one ends up starting. So hopefully that changes, but it sucks for people who own Wild Turtle. Liquid over Cloud9. Cloud9 started out good here. Some nice early game shot calls by High, but Liquid, came out with the better team fights and won in the end. So not a big surprise. Gravity over CLG. So I'll talk about Gravity's awesomeness rather than CLG's terribleness. So Gravity really passing their 2 test weeks with so awesome, 4-0 against Liquid, Impulse, CLG, and TSM. It does not get better than that. So I really hope that you guys pick them up when you could, because you will not be able to find them anymore. Dignitas over Teammate. This was good. They're supposed to win this game, but it was good that they did. I was a little bit worried about them after they lost to TDK, but they showed that they could do it. Enemy over TDK. So I actually found this a little bit surprising. I would have picked TDK after I thought they did well against Dignitas, but apparently they still got some meshing to do. So you got to put them on hold let them develop a little longer. Impulse over CLG. Impulse, really crushed this game. In terms of like, it was like CLG had some good plays, like they got the bottom inhib, but it was just like it was. I can't. I'm not. I can't even say that I'm surprised anymore, because it's CLG and they just go on tilt and they collapse halfway through the season. So it's super unfortunate. I'll talk about whether or not I think you guys should start them next week, but just disastrous. Gravity over TSM. So this was the last part in their puzzle of awesomeness for Gravity. Wild Turtle played this game, and he got the loss, which is unfortunate. So I don't know. It was just a bad game. Gravity just had really good draft phase and was able to counter the Runeglaive as pick. So yeah, Liquid over Dignitas. I think this not too surprising here. Liquid with a pretty dominant win. I think it was like 28 minutes. So solid. And then Team 8 over Cloud9. I actually didn't get a chance to check this game out, but it's not good. It's not good that Cloud9 lost to Team 8. Really, really bad, actually. But hopefully you guys didn't start them, as you shouldn't have, because you just gotta cut your losses with Cloud9 players. Week 7, looking forward, preview. We'll stick around in NA. Team Liquid playing against TDK and TSM. So I still think you start Liquid this week, even though they have that tough matchup against TSM. I think they get enough points from TDK that it justifies starting them, and they've been good. They can still beat TSM. It's definitely not a guaranteed loss. So go ahead and start your Liquid players. Enemy going up against CLG and Gravity. Tough week for Enemy. I wouldn't start any Enemy guys this week. Gravity against Cloud9 and Enemy, like I said. So go ahead and start your Gravity guys. Absolutely, 100%. Team 8 against TSM and Team Impulse. Rough week for them. No reason to start them anyway. Not even in like a flex position, so stay away. Impulse, like I said, against Team 8, but also against Dignitas. So I think they could lose to Dignitas, but I would think that they would lose it with plenty of fantasy points. So go ahead and start your Impulse players. TDK against Team Liquid and CLG. This is a tough week for TDK, and after going 0-2 this week, losing to Enemy, I'm not too impressed. So you got to let them develop a little bit more. So no go on TDK. CLG versus Enemy and TDK, like I said. So this week, they're totally tilting. They're doing terribly right now, but this week is a nice break in the schedule. I think these are the 2 bottom tier teams. So I think CLG recuperates, revamps. I think you can go ahead and start your CLG players for this week. Cloud9 against Gravity and Dignitas. Just not an easy lineup, or not an easy matchup. I wouldn't start your Cloud9 players. TSM versus Team 8 and Team Liquid. They're your top tier players. You got to go and start them. Wild Turtle, a little bit of a different story. If he ends up only playing 1 game, if he ends up playing the Team 8 game, I would say maybe it's worth starting him, even though he won't get anything day 2 because they might just go ham on Team 8 in day 1. But if he's up against Team Liquid, then I just definitely wouldn't start him. But if there's an alternative choice to starting Wild Turtle, if he's only going to be playing 1 game this week, you definitely should go for it, obviously. Then Dignitas going up against Impulse and Cloud9. So Dignitas has proven that they are pretty decent in fantasy point production. I think they get the win over Cloud9. I don't really think they're going to beat Impulse, but they could. So if you're in need of a flex, you can go ahead and get Shifter, Gamsu, Core JJ. I think that's fine. Switching over to EU for week 7. So I'm going to clump H2K and Origin together here because they're both against Fnatic, and then they both have, one has Giants, Origins against Giants, and H2K against Rocket, who they both probably will be able to beat. So obviously the problem is that they're both playing Fnatic, and you really can't say that they're going to beat Fnatic. You could say, oh, the RNG gods are against Fnatic, they're bound to lose a game sometime soon, and who better to beat them than Origin and H2K? You could say that. I just think it's a little bit too risky, and I think there's better choices for this week. Origin and H2K will probably get you enough points in their wins over the team when they don't play Fnatic to justify starting them, but I think there's enough craziness and mid-tierness going on in EU that you can actually get some more points out of other teams. So I'll get into that in a minute. So specifically SK, right? SK is up against Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves. Copenhagen Wolves, very unlikely that they're going to lose to them. And if they do, it's going to have plenty of fantasy points, as well as SK versus Gambit. So I think that, honestly, I think playing Fox instead of Xpeke this week is worth it. I think Fox will put up more points, especially since we're at the end of this with week 7, 8, and 9. You know what your record is. You know what you have to do to win your league. If you're desperate for points 4, you got to do a little bit more bold decisions. And while your Origin and H2K players are definitely safer choices because they probably will put up points in at least one win, you have to be a little bit bold towards the end of the season. Just by nature of the game. So I would go ahead and players like SK players, I think will produce more. Unicorns of Love players up against Copenhagen Wolves and Elements, I think can also produce more. So you have some other options over Origin and H2K starts. Now, I wouldn't go ahead and drop any players if you have the space on your bench, the alternatives, where you can make waiver wire decisions or just make replacements from your bench. Absolutely do it. But do not be dropping any of these Origin or H2K players just because this week isn't a great week for them. So Unicorns, yes. SK, yes. Gambit is also a pretty good choice because they're up against SK and Giants. I think they could 2-0 this week. They could also go 0-2. I think they're a little bit more risky, but they're coming back into relevance. I think they're getting to the potential of where they were projected in the beginning of the season as being like a top 4, top 5 team. So I think that you can start Gambit players in like a flex position, as well as Rocket. Even though they're going up against H2K, I think they get the win against Elements, and Rocket has been really consistent. Outside that 1 week that I mentioned earlier, they almost always put up a decent amount of fantasy points. So if you're in need of a flex, throw in Nuke Duck to your flex. He's available in a bunch of leagues that I'm in. So yeah, teams to stay away from would be Copenhagen Wolves, definitely. Elements, just because they don't have a terrible week against Rocket and Unicorns of Love, but they're just better choices than Elements players right now. There really is. And then Giants up against Origin, who they'll probably lose to. And even though they can beat Gambit, I don't think that it's going to be worth it. Just in that potential win to outweigh the the stopping that they're probably going to get against Origin. So yeah, and then obviously Fnatic. Fnatic has a tough week against H2K and Origin. They do, but they're number 1. They're the best. They're perfect. No reason to not start them. So yeah. But yeah, so overall with EU's in this cool spot where you have the 3 Origin, Fnatic, H2K who are going to be pretty consistent, and then you have this mid-tier teams that all can take games off each other. They can all have these long games, and there's going to be a bunch of fantasy points to go around. It's pretty nice. And then over in NA, now you have Gravity and Dignitas basically coming out of the woodwork. We're not projected to be particularly big fantasy point producers, but they can also be really good for you as well. So definitely options for you to plug in holes that you might have had in certain mistakes in your draft. So yeah. All right. So talking about specific matchups. So this week I'm 5-1 in this league. Sorry, I'm 5-1. I'm about 60 points behind. So for top lane, it's always between Quas and Impact. Probably going to start Impact this week just because Quas has to go up against TSM. Not always a great outcome against TSM. So I'll be starting Impact in my top lane. For jungle, I usually start Amazing, but this week I'm starting Move. I think Move is going to get more points. I think he has an easier week. He doesn't have to play Fnatic. I have Amazing on my bench. mid, I have Fox instead of Ryu. Ryu did great for me that last week. I picked him up in that trade that last week, and I'm really happy with him. But I'm not too confident in his ability to take on Fnatic. So I think Fox has a much easier week against Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves, and I think he's going to put up more points. Even though Ryu's a safer bet, I'm going to go with Fox because I need to start breaking down this points for. Additionally, in this specific matchup, my opponent is 2-4. I'm not really worried about. I'm just not too worried about getting the actual loss, and I'm much more focused on trying to get this points for gap closed because I only have 3 weeks to do it. And you just have to assume that that the guy who's tied with me in first place is also going to keep winning. So yeah, and then I have Reckless and Fnatic, Reckless and Yellowstar as my bot lane. I'm not really going to take those guys out. And then I can put in H2K or Origin for my team. I don't know. I'm probably going to go with H2K because they're a little bit more objective focused, but I think they'll both go 1-1 because I think they're going to lose to Fnatic. And then I have Altec in my flex position. So yeah, the only really tough decision that I had to make was in order to do this, in order to get Fox and keep Ryu, I had to drop Phoenix. And Phoenix has been good to me. I'm really happy with Phoenix. And it was really tough for me to drop him, but I did do my research. I didn't just drop him willy-nilly. I dropped him for 2 reasons. A, because I thought Fox was going to put up more points. Sorry about that. And I also thought that I looked into it, and I saw that we have really strong mid laners in my league. We have people like Zhao Zhao, Pole Belter, Febivin, Bjergsen, all these really strong mid laners starting. And so there's no real reason to think that any of these other players would pick Phoenix up simply because he's not really needed. I don't think Phoenix provides a better option than any of the other players that are currently in the starting lineup for any of my other guys, for any of the other team. So I dropped Phoenix. I definitely plan on picking him up. Hopefully no one from this league, sees this vlog and picks him up to be a dick. But it's a risk that I'm taking because I'm really happy with Ryu, and I think I'll be able to use Altec in my flex for the foreseeable future as well. So I'm not too worried about that dropping of Phoenix. So yeah. All right, so that does it for the match preview for me. All right, so let's move to fantasy power rankings. All right, so we'll start out in top lane, and so yeah. So for top lane, for my power rankings, I'll be doing a top 8 format because we do have 8 team capacities in our fantasy LCS leagues. It'll just be the 8 players who I think will be producing the most points, who I think you should prioritize for that given week. So yeah, to start off, we got Haunter, coming in at 1, going up against Enemy and C9. They just finished beating up on the top 4 teams of the NALCS, basically, with the exception of Dig. So going up against these lower tier teams is a recipe for some serious fantasy production. Zion coming in at 2. Obviously, CLG's been struggling as of late, but I don't think that there is a better remedy than going up against Enemy and TDK in the same week. So I think they come back with some serious points. Impact at 3 up against Dignitas and Teammate. I think the Dignitas and Impulse matchup is really good. I think it'll be long, drawn out, plenty of fantasy points to go around. Huni going up against Origin and H2K. This is just a testament to how awesome Fnatic and Huni is, because basically if you're up against any other team that went up against Origin and H2K, it wouldn't even be on this list. So it shows that Fnatic is just freaking amazing. Freddy going up against Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves. SK in general has been really, really productive these last 3 weeks, putting up more than 40 points from each of their respective positions. And going up against Gambit, I think it'll be a long, drawn-out game. And Copenhagen Wolves just gives up a lot of fantasy points to their enemies. So Freddy, definitely good to go this week. Quas going up against TDK and TSM. Quas has actually been awesome. He's number 2 after Huni in total points for top laners. The only problem that he's going up against TSM this week. That's why I have him ranked relatively low. Because not necessarily that I'm afraid of the Quas Dyrus matchup. I just think that TSM can sometimes do really well and really limit their opponent's points in games that they win hardcore. But obviously that doesn't happen all the time, and TL does look strong. TSM doesn't look as strong. So not a terrible week. And then Otoame and Soaz taking up the rear. Another case where these guys would usually be higher, but they both have to go up against Fnatic. And they're probably both going to lose to Fnatic, so that's going to limit their point output just a little bit. Honorable mentions, I'm going to throw in Vizicachi, also an easy week. But he just hasn't really been producing too many points, even in wins, especially after last year. He's number 3 last year, not even top 10 this year, so a little bit wary on that front. And also Cabashard with an honorable mention. With Gambit kind of rising in stock a little bit, I think that he's going to come back to that kind of carry mentality that he had in last split. So I think you can go ahead, if you don't have access to the top 8 players here, I think that those honorable mentions are good enough to give you at least a decent flex option. Well, not even flex, because you wouldn't want them flex in a starting top position. I think they'll get you enough points to get you through the week. So yeah, alright, moving to mid. Mid actually has a bunch of pretty decent options this week, even outside the top 8 that I'll explain to you. But yeah, so number 1, Pobelter against Enemy and TDK. Pobelter puts up a ton of points in CLG's wins. Obviously, they haven't had too many wins in the last 2 weeks, but I think that they come back, bounce back with a big week against Enemy and TDK. So that's why he takes number 1. Keen at 2 against C9 and Enemy. Once again, I think Gravity is going to be on these top 8 lists for the rest of the split, especially after doing really well against top teams in the NA LCS scene. Febivin coming in at 3. Even though he's up against H2K and Origin, the man always gets top 5. The only time he hasn't gotten 5 was 1 week where he got 6. And he's just uber consistent, really reliable, no reason not to have him. Fox going up against Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves, once again, part of this SK fantasy point, massive fantasy point train that's been going on recently, and I think that this week will facilitate that as well. Bjergsen coming in at 5. Bjergsen's always going to be on this list. The dude's amazing. He's number 1 right now for mid lane production. Only reason he's not higher this week is because I think other teams just have simply easier matchups. And Team Liquid, they do look good. I don't think they look better than TSM, but there's a shot that TSM could drop that game. But it would most likely be a longer, drawn-out game where Bjergsen is still going to be able to put up a bunch of points. Zhao coming in at 6 against Dig and Team 8. Zhao, nice bounce-back year for him, especially being really underwhelming last year following his MVP split when he was on LMQ. But it's good to see him back in action. I think they have a pretty easy matchup this week against Team 8, and then against Dignitas, I think he's got a long, drawn-out game that he's going to be able to accumulate plenty of points from. Number 7, Power of Evil, going up against Copenhagen Wolves and Elements. PoE hasn't been too impressive this split in terms of fantasy production, even from like a flex aspect, but I think this week is where he starts to turn that around against 2 pretty easy matchups. So definitely think he has the advantage over Soren. Maybe doesn't have the advantage over Froggen in terms of lane, but Froggen's not going to kill him in lane. So I think it's a good recipe for Power of Evil this week. And number 8, I have Betsy. And this is a little bit riskier just because they could lose to SK and Giants, but I think that even if they do lose, I think these are 2 long, drawn-out games where there's just going to be a lot of fantasy points to be had overall. And Gambit, slowly creeping themselves back into fantasy relevance in general. So a bunch of honorable mentions, though, for this. You have Phoenix, Ryu, and Expeke, all honorable mentions. 3 of those guys are all really solid fantasy producers. The only reason I don't have them in is because Phoenix has to go up against Bjergsen in his second game of the week, and then Ryu and Expeke both have to go up against Febivin as well. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to put them in the top 8. I still think that you can start them in terms of like they're safer because they probably are going to beat the other teams when they don't face those top tier teams, but for the most points for, I think that you look at these top 8, and that's who you got to go for. Alright, so switching over to junglers. My number 1 for this week for jungle is a little bit crazy, but I'm okay with it because I think Sven has been doing really, really well for SK. He's been a big reason for them to get these recent wins and putting up these crazy fantasy points. So against Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves, I think that success continues. Rush against Dig and Team 8. Rush has also been doing well. Impulse in general, just doing what they're supposed to do with their large amounts of points being produced, so A-okay there. Xmithy against Enemy and TDK. Sure, Xmithy screws up sometimes, face checks level 1, just does weird stuff, but I don't think that the lower tier teams like Enemy and TDK are going to be able to capitalize on potential mistakes, and they might just not make those same mistakes against these lower tier teams. Santorin going up against Team 8 and Team Liquid. Santorin's number 1 right now in points for junglers. Only reason he's not higher this week is because he does have to go up against Team Liquid. Other than that, the dude's been really, really good, producing a ton of points, so always keep him around. Move against Enemy and C9, once again, easy week. Move hasn't done like super awesome in terms of fantasy points, especially for going 4-0 the last couple weeks, but in winning teams, you know, he's still going to put up those points, and I think it's really, really safe to play Gravity this week as well. Rainover against H2K and Origin. Once again, he's low this week because he has a tough week, but overall I think they're going to win, and I think they'll do well. Kickus going up against Copenhagen Wolves and Elements. Easy match for Unicorns of Love, and they came off a good week last week, so no reason to think Kickus won't be able to produce some this week. And then number 8, amazing. Number 2 on the fantasy points overall. Just been doing really, really well. And high kill participation, it's been great. He's up against Fnatic, so I don't know how well or how many points he's going to end up producing against them. Honorable mentions for this week is really only I Will Dominates, because he's been good. It's just he's against TSM, and I think they could get kind of bullied around by TSM. As well as Lulex, who's been good, but H2K against Fnatic, so you really don't know how that will turn out. So yeah, all right. So switching over to support power rankings, Yellow Star takes the cake at number 1. He is number 1. He averages 2 points more than the next player, which is Kasing. Even though he's up against H2K and Origin, it does not matter. This guy is unstoppable. I have Adrian second, going up against Dignitas and Teammate. Adrian's been really good. He's actually he's 4. He's number 4 on total points for all support. So he's definitely doing well, and this week I think is going to facilitate that. So Adrian number 2, and Rated number 3. Hasn't done that well this split, but the dude has been able to put up points recently, as have the rest of SK, and once again this week it's going to be good. Bunny, for the foreseeable future, Bunny's going to be good. He's paired with Altic, who I also think is really amazing this week against Enemy, and C9 should be racking up plenty of points as well. And then 5, we got Aphromu with TDK and Enemy, paired with Double Lift against these two relatively weak bot lanes. I think they're going to do well in lane, and it'll translate into team fights with plenty of points for Afro. Lustboy at 6, going up against Teammate and Team Liquid. You know, Lustboy hasn't had like a super awesome support season for production. Plenty of supports are before him, but I think he has a decently good week. It's a little tough because you don't know what the Turtle/Keith situation is going to be, but that being said, I don't think they're going to do terribly, so Lustboy makes it in at 6. Hillisang at 7, also hasn't had the greatest year either, but this week against Copenhagen Wolves and Elements, I just think it's a little bit too juicy to pass up on the opportunity, and he does have good participation when they do get wins. And then finally, Kasing to round it off. Only reason Kasing isn't higher is because he's going up against Fnatic. And it's tough. It's always tough against Fnatic with that experienced bot lane. So that's why he's a little bit lower on. Honorable mention would be Mithy and X-Special, simply because they seem to always put out, but they have to go up against decently difficult teams this week. So I would stay away if you really need them. If you need them and none of these 8 are available to you, you can go for them. But try to stick to these 8. Alright, so to round it off with AD Carry, Doublelift starts it off at number 1. I do think that both the CLG carries will do very well this week. They're going to be hungry. They're going to try and get off that tilt, and TDK and Enemy are the perfect teams to supply that for them. Altic at number 2. He's going to be up here a lot these last 3 weeks. Just a really good, consistent player. He's putting up a lot of points, and he should continue to do so. Reckless, the number 1 AD carry in points 4 right now. Doesn't matter that he has a tough week because it's Fnatic, and Fnatic is perfect, so no reason to hesitate on him. Apollo, going up against Dig and Teammate. Sometimes Apollo does lack the kill participation in wins. Sometimes, a lot of times, they go through Rush and Zhao and Impact to get more points, but I think Apollo's going to be okay this week. He just says, I think it's going to be a long game with the Dignitas, and I think he's going to be fine with plenty of points for all. Candy Panda going up against Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves. Another SK player. I just think SK is going to have a good week this week. On paper, they definitely should. In the last 3 weeks, they've been really good as well, so definitely go ahead with him. Piglet going up against TDK and TSM. So Piglet is, I think, only Piglet and Quas are the only 2 TL players that made it into my top 8. The rest I feel a little bit worried about, but the main reason that I put Piglet in here is because I think he will do fine against TSM's bot lane, because they have that kind of weird situation with Keith and Turtle. We don't really know who's starting or what the deal is, but I think Piglet will be able to take advantage of that. Vardags at number 7 going up against Copenhagen Wolves and Elements. Honestly, he really hasn't done anything special this split, but I think that this week is just an easy week for Unicorns, and he's going to be a product of the team's points overall, so that's why he gets in at 7. And then Neil sneaking in at 8. Obviously, this guy's going to be much higher ranked in later weeks. It's just he's up against Fnatic, and it's always tough to see if they're going to get many points against Fnatic in general. So other mentions would be Hjarnan. I didn't put him in just because he does have to go up against Fnatic, and you know, I don't know how much points he's going to get. They really could might end up with, like, 25 to 30, which would be fine in a week like this, but I don't think that that'll be the top 8 in point production. Also, just on watch, you got to look out for what the deal is with Turtle and Keith. If they're splitting time again, it's going to be tough for me to say that you guys should start either of them, because you're limiting yourself on points for an entire day. Maybe if Wild Turtle gets to go up against the easier matchup in Team 8, then maybe you can start him. Hopefully he gets enough points from that one, but outside of that, outside hedging your bets on that, I really would stay away from both of them. So yeah. Alright guys, so that about does it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed the new stuff. Let me know what you think. And feel free to comment with any questions about your lineup and all that good stuff. Alright guys, okay.